My name is Maniza Naqvi, and this is the 33rd episode of the Little Book Company podcast. My guest for this podcast is Amitava Kumar. He is an Indian American author, novelist, journalist, and academic. He is a professor of English at Vassar College. His latest novel is called My Beloved Life. His other novels include Nobody Does the Right Thing, A Time Outside This Time, Immigrant, Montana, a novel, The Lovers, a novel, The Yellow Book, A Traveler's Diary, The Blue Book, A Writer's Journal, Every Day I Write the Book, A Foreigner Carrying in the Crook of His Arm a Tiny Bomb, and Passport Photos. Welcome, Amitava.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
जी हम लोग we are doing people to people diplomacy, India, Pakistan, वगैरह वगैरह.
Vagara, vagara. And I guess it would be appropriate to also say here that you and I were columnists, Monday columnists for 3quartsdaily.com.
Yes. Long ago. Yes.
Ago. Yes. And I just want to say something about your writing that I find it to be very intimate and personal and so interesting, so intellectual and journalistic in ways, in many ways. Your fiction and nonfiction shed light on the social and political pathologies of America and India in the past 3 decades. Am I correct to say that?
Yes. Thank you. Even the novel, the name, the word novel, comes from the word novel and the word news both share the same Latin root. The new. What is new? And so I have always felt that the novel, like the news, should reveal what is happening in the world, and not just what is happening in the world in a longer sense, but what is happening in the world that day. I like the feeling of a certain immediacy, what I've sometimes called blood on the bandage, that the prose should reveal. A certain immediacy of our life. Ki bhai, aaj kya hua? What happened today? And if I can bring that, whether it is in nonfiction or whether it is even in fiction, then I think literature is serving a particular role in trying to shine a light on the day-to-day happenings of our world. Otherwise, we live in the midst of a chaos of an onslaught of news. Novels should allow us a certain framing of the news. So I appreciate what you just said.
I so agree with you in so many ways. And Amitava, in the last 3 decades, in which you and I have both been writing, there's been a trend towards forcing the novel to be just a page turner, an escape route, entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And anything that really speaks to the moment that we're in as a historical record has been shunned.
Yes. Often a shallow understanding of plot takes over the idea of meaning, of understanding, or even of narration, of narrative that is sometimes as slow as life itself, and sometimes as rushing as life itself. That is instead given over to the mechanics of plot. And I think that is a loss.
And is that something, this loss and the moment we're in, is this something that also, I don't want to say that the word obsession comes to mind, but is a
preoccupation of mine, yes.
Preoccupation overriding concern?
Yep. To find a form that adequately reflects the pace of the world. Today, for example, I was reading a classic of American nonfiction, Walden, by Henry David Thoreau. And I was reading it only because I'm teaching a course on nature writing next semester. And I was thinking, I should read this book, and I came across this description where he's describing the railroads that have, he's writing at the, in late 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
So he's describing the railroads, and he says there is a clatter of railways, and he describes the men who are working on the railroad, and he says, hasn't the speed at which they talk even changed from the time when they were on horses or driving in horse-drawn carriages? And I thought, okay, I must, if next time I travel on a train, try to think about how is it different from when one is flying, how to think about time.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that preoccupation, I want to answer your question about writing by saying, when I was writing, not this last novel, but the one before that, it is called A Time Outside This Time.
Mm-hmm.
I called up these researchers at MIT who had said, in a study I had seen first mentioned on Twitter, that bots, like humans, also spread fake news. Bots are used
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter to spread fake news.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that bots spread fake news as well as what is fact at the same rate. Bots can be used either way. But humans spread fake news 6 times faster than they do what is real news. And so I was interested in understanding speed and trying to understand what is it that makes people spread fake news, in the same way as what you and I were talking a moment ago about plot. What is it that gives a certain thing a certain velocity?
Mm-hmm.
What is the velocity of lies? So in that novel, when I called these folks up, they said they believe, in fact, it was an Indian scientist also who was involved in that study, a certain Dr. Bhattacharya. They said that they believe they had not, their term for it was that they thought that lies are more novel. The use of that word, novel, made me think, what then is the space? What is the status of fiction? What must the role of fiction be in the time of that other fiction called fake news? So I'm trying to say to you that, yes, my preoccupation is to find both how a certain kind of fictionality has come into our lives because of the spread of fake news and the adoption of social media and certain speed with the virality of untruth. To think of that, and at the same time to think, what then is the proper response to it? Should I then produce fiction that is actually only fact? Or should I interest myself in thinking about other patterns or other forms of fiction? And I think what I've been trying to do since then, especially in that novel, is trying to understand that what should actually, as if forms and a novel form is not dead, then in what dynamic way does it respond to the times, and how does it evolve to deal with the challenges of the new day?
So the novel you're talking about is A Time Outside Our Time, which there was a sentence that struck me in describing it, where when
the role of fiction in the time of that other fiction called fake news.
It's a brilliant meditation on life in a post-truth era.
Yeah. That's how it was described, yes.
And could it be, I mean, as you were talking right now, I just thought, could it be the reason human beings spread lies faster, 6 times faster than bots? And because when we hear something preposterous, I mean, we know that something is preposterous, and we are so excited and agitated by it that
yes,
we immediately share it with someone so that to check whether it resonates with them. And
yes,
we weave something more into it, and that gets spread further. But it's not we love to spread lies, but because we perhaps detect something inauthentic in it and want to share it with another human being for them to to edit it for us.
Yeah, maybe to wet it or to and if we go with your theory, which might be entirely plausible, that will explain why there has been the growth also of fact checking. It's not enough, but there is a very responsible part, for example, in my country of origin, in India, where these folks play a very important role in fact checking what is being spread on the net. The problem, of course, is that what they do is always a little too late and too little, because it's almost like, how shall I say, lies are almost like radioactive material. They have long half-lives. They continue to circulate, and that is why you will see. I mean, one of the examples my narrator takes up is how people were being lynched in India because they were suspected of being kidnappers. And they would circulate this video. The video showed a motorcycle stopping, and then a guy on the pillion picking up a kid, and the motorcycle going away. The truth, however, was that this video had been made by an NGO in Karachi who was warning how children should be wary of strangers who stop like that. And the person who headed the NGO was then asked what he thought of this. And he said, I want to meet, I can't exactly recall the word, but I have cited it in my novel, the man who ran that NGO, this man in Karachi. He said, I want to meet the man who dreamed up this evil, who turned something that was so human into something that was so evil, that led to the deaths of innocent people, so.
But that also.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Continue. Finish.
No. Please. I had paused because I was trying to figure out what was the point I was making. So please go ahead.
What? No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just saying that I don't know whether you're aware that Facebook owns WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is a wonderful way for people to communicate in India, because it is a free app. So you can call or text using your phone if you have Wi-Fi. Except the truth is that WhatsApp and Facebook, but certainly WhatsApp, is the fastest way in which mistruths or fake news is spread in India. Lynchings of Muslims on suspicion of eating beef, for example, are coordinated on WhatsApp. And so the way in which people who manufacture rumors, what they are really doing is, citizens might be only interested in the fact that such devices are used to spread mayhem and murder. But the novelist must contend with what might seem a narrower question, which is, bhai, what is so inventive about such rumors that we are failing at our task in producing more imaginative truths that capture the minds of the people and lead them to other ends than massive people? I'm trying to say that ours should be almost like a professional challenge. Why is the right wing, or why are the narrow-minded, why are the bigoted, why are the able to invent more engaging narratives, if that is indeed the truth?
And have you come up with an answer, or?
Yeah, well, I think if one what I try to do in that novel, but also in other places, that if one writes a book which makes the reader skeptical of what they are reading, and they want to always check and cross-check the information you are giving, then you're already producing a slightly bit more alert, a more critical readership. For example, people will always say, I've met many, many readers who, in response to a novel of mine called Immigrant, Montana, say that, boss, I needed to Google many things. It is based, one of the central characters there is based on Iqbal Ahmed, who was a very famous Pakistani political theorist living in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of his birth and migration from near Sasaram in Bihar to Pakistan, and then his arrival here and what he did, and his activism during the Vietnam War is a part of the story. And people would say to me that they needed to Google, and I thought, well, that's great, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to be able to Google various things. Did Iqbal Ahmed say, Mr. Kissinger, you are under arrest? You are under citizen's arrest? Well, that was a part of the court record that, they were planning. They had discussed this plan
Mm-hmm.
to kidnap Kissinger.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a wonderful thing for me to, it seemed so far-fetched that it seemed like fiction itself, but it was also in some ways true, because it was indeed a plan that had been mooted and it had entered the court records. And I was very glad, even if it came only in the form of a complaint from people, that they needed to Google things in order to find out if this was indeed true. I think that is something I want to play around with when people ask themselves how much of this is true, because then we develop a healthy skepticism of whatever we are being told all the time by the media, by our rulers, sometimes even by our writers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just I think I'll say it again, that perhaps the reason that human beings spread lies 6 times faster than bots is because they do have this skepticism, whether it's healthy or maybe unhealthy, because they have this need for sensationalism.
Yeah, in which case, Maniza, I would say it is not skepticism as much as gullibility.
Gullibility.
And I'm myself guilty of that. When I read the story that Donald Trump, after he became president, would spend nights looking at, complaining to his staff that the Gorilla channel was not on, and he was walking around in his bathrobe, sitting very close. An Australian journalist had put this story out, sitting very close to the television screen, looking at the Gorilla channel, at this animal. I wanted it to be, I believed it, and I might even have retweeted it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I reveal in the novel itself, it turned out to be false.
Mm-hmm.
It was an Australian prankster who had dreamt this up.
Mm-hmm.
But it intrigued me,
Mm-hmm.
I also want always to, in my novels, in my writing, I always also want to suggest to my readers how unbelievable reality really is. There's nothing more, I think it is Lenin who said at some point that there's nothing more radical than reality itself. I mean, truth is indeed stranger than fiction, And so I want to be how shall I say it? I want to be an assiduous note taker about how reality is unraveling every day, all the things that are revealed to us about how the world functions.
Mm-hmm.
It is filled. We live in a very astonishing world, all kinds of things happen. And it is amazing to serve as a writer, as a witness to this astonishment.
Mm-hmm. And taking you back to the velocity of our lives and of time, and the velocity that's been added into that over the centuries, with moving from walking to carriages to horses to trains, ships, and to flight.
Yes.
Has that increased our anxiety levels, and at the speed at which we are anxious, and the speed at which we speak, and at the speed at which we live in fear?
I certainly think that it has increased our level of distraction, because even when something makes us miserable, the next minute is filled with a new misery because something else has popped up on our phones. So we live in a time of distraction. And therefore, our responses to Any one challenge is always overwhelmed by a different challenge that arises in the very next moment. So, it is, how should I put it? It is an assault by ever increasing stimuli. Every minute, your phone buzzes. There is one piece of news. Uh, and then you get a text from a friend which says, switch on the TV. How often have you and I maybe received a text that says, are you watching the news? And, so we live in that moment.
Yes.
I don't think you or I have gotten a text saying, are you reading this novel? I mean, we wish it did, but the novel is a way of slowing down the news. There is a phrase that Jimmy Fallon uses on his show, slow jam the news. For example, if you Google it, you'll find Barack Obama slow jamming the news. And so Jimmy Fallon on his comedy show will have a part of the news being narrated, but it's also made fun with a little bit of music and dance. And I think the novel's role at the moment partly is also that of slow jamming the news.
And it may also be that its role is that it makes the moment sacred. Don't move on, hold it in the palms of your hands, both hands,
Right.
and look
Right.
and stay with it, be in it, be with it. That's the novel.
Yes.
If you go on to just learning that your friend had a brain tumor while watching breaking news on television, and then texting somebody else on some other subject, meanwhile getting away from what your friend is going through.
That is true. Yes.
Right. And that makes me also think about, Amitava, you're a writer, you're a journalist, you're an academic, and you paint the most exquisite art
Thank you so
on
much.
newsprint.
Yeah, that was also that was a response during the pandemic, because especially my younger child was, I don't know, he was just 10 when the pandemic arrived, and in the lockdown, we thought, what should we do every day? And he said that we decided we'd do some things every day. He said he wanted to have a six-pack. So we thought, okay, we'll do planking for a minute. But then we also thought, I said we should write a paragraph every day. And then there was a woman called Wendy McNaughton, who on Instagram was holding small classes every day, free, small classes where children were being asked to paint something. So started painting with my kids. They dropped off after a while, and we did not watch Wendy McNaughton's wonderful program again, but I just kept making a painting every day just as a record. And there I thought that the news needed to be engaged with, because there was so much, WHO had said that there was, along with the pandemic, it said there was an infodemic. There was a spread of fake news. And I was thinking about that novel that I was working on. And I thought, why not use the news, newsprint that had to do the paint, partially obscuring something, partially revealing something, but also showing the beauty that was in nature. Because by the time late March, April came, in my backyard, there were so many beautiful flowers. And I thought, let's use the New York Times. And I started painting on that. And then that became a blue book. And then by the time the second wave arrived, Omicron, etc., I was in London with my students. I was teaching a course that was called Black London Walking Diary. We would, more than the classroom, we would actually walk on the streets along the routes where the stories were set. All kinds of writers, Hanif Qureshi, Zadie Smith, Temur Sumro. They took us along the route where the stories were set. and we would write about it. And then, so I was making drawings there, keeping a journal of a sort. It's basically an exercise in how to be attentive to the world. And when you draw, you're again slowing it down, because in order to draw, you have to observe, and it's a slow process. It's slower than simply consuming it as an image. You have to draw it, and that has grown as a practice. And now at the end of this year, I'm going to bring out a new book called The Green Book, because the blue book and the yellow, if you mix blue and yellow, you get green. And it is also a response to climate change, and to think about nature in a different way, and how to record the devastation, and also just to engage more fully with the environment. So, for example, last summer I went down the length of the Ganges from the Himalayan foothills down to the Bay of Bengal, and did drawing and did reports on Substack, but that is a part of the yellow book about the river and the life on its banks.
Can I ask you, was there another reason perhaps that you chose to go down the Ganges last year?
Yes, what had happened was that in March last year, my father died, and I grew up in Patna, where my father lived and my mother lived, and my father, had expressed his desire to my sister that he wanted to be cremated in Banaras. So we took his body there, and I felt though that the way in which, rituals and these things dominate, I felt that there was not much space for grief, that I was just following what the priest was saying. And I thought I should slow that down. I should return to that place just calmly, to feel what I was feeling and to remember that and put that down into words. So that is the desire that took me beside the Ganges. But then I thought, why had he wanted to be cremated beside the Ganges? There was a certain understanding of tradition and of the past and of the river itself and the role it plays. So I thought, let me go back to its origins, to the place where it becomes Ganga, the river, and then go down and also record changes around it. What's happening with what was actually heterogeneous, and is also heterogeneous and diverse in our culture. How is it, however, under the present government, made to appear homogeneous, and culture is being made narrower? An identity is being forced down a particular route. And so just to record all these things too. So that desire to explore the changes but also to respond to something personal, and try to understand and to be able to say something about it was the reason. Yes.
First of all, I want to condole with you on
Thank you.
on your huge loss, and I mean, yeah, I'm sorry for your tremendous loss, and
Thank you.
maybe we should take a pause here, and
Zero.
so I'm going to stop the recording here. Amitava, we were talking about your going to Benares, and I'm thinking of in Nobody Does the Right Thing, Vinod takes his father's ashes.
Yes, yes, yes.
It almost feels like the news foretold.
आवाज कट गई.
I said it feels a little bit like the news foretold.
Yes, 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 yes. It does. You're right. And I thought, to be quite honest, I thought of that. I thought of what I had already written when I was experiencing it, because there's a description, for example, in the novel of how the ash glinted in the water as it sunk And that was when I remembered the novel again, when in real life, I waded with my father's ashes into the water. So, if you're being honest in your writing, there's a great intimacy that is always present between life and literature. And I think it is inevitable. It's nothing special. It is just something that is inevitable and reassuring then about how words should exist in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you imagine life, and that if you're imagining it truthfully, that life is bound to happen.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Amitava, will you read to me from Nobody Does the Right Thing? I'm thinking particularly, specifically, I was struck by a paragraph which in the version I have of Nobody Does the Right Thing is on page 103.
Yes. I should just mention that the novel Nobody Does the Right Thing was earlier published in India under the title Home Products. So here is the paragraph. There had been too many deaths around him when he had lived in Patna. Each morning on his way to school during his boyhood, he would pass the burning ghat. He had become used to the sight of fathers carrying babies wrapped in white cloth to the river's edge. It was less painful to confront this death in art. In a gallery in Delhi, he had seen an installation about a girl whose eyes had been sold for money. The artist had taken the newspaper photograph of the little eyeless girl and blown it up and painted over it. Binod liked that and wanted to do the same with words. He wanted to make a statement about society. He didn't want to go on merely experiencing those things anymore. He had made a firm decision that prose was going to be his medium. The romance of writing poetry had appealed to him for a while, but it felt unnatural, as if he were walking around with a flower tucked into his buttonhole.
Brilliant.
Thanks for reminding me of this paragraph. I realize it is amazing to me how works can sometimes be continuous, have a continuity between them. In this paragraph that you asked me to read, I suddenly saw that the artist, it is based on a real piece of art. The artist whose work was based on the newspaper photograph of the little eyeless girl is Atul Dodia. I used it, I forgot about this. And then in my last novel, I had come across another painting of, I had no memory of having made use of Dodia's painting here. And then in that recent novel, I had started with a painting of Dodia's of his own father. And by then I had come to know Dodia, and I had written to him and said, when I write this book, I'll use it as my cover. My publishers didn't use it, but I have written about that painting elsewhere. And it was certainly a part of my imagination when I was writing it. And so I'm grateful to you for this little discovery. That's amazing to me, that I had actually dealt with Dodia's work earlier and had just forgotten. But this is how things are connected. And it is, again, in my recent work that he has resurfaced. So that is great. That's amazing to me.
And I also, just the line that really struck me was the artist had taken the newspaper photograph of the little eyeless girl and blown it up and painted over it. Binod liked that and wanted to do the same with words.
Yes.
And I think, is it that you take your journalistic side and you evolve it into a novel. You take the news, you get into the novel.
Yes, there is some painting over it happening. It's like there's a process of transformation. Something is taken, you keep it as the, let's say, the pentimenti, as the Italians say in painting. It is under the surface. It is partially present, but it's also partially obscured. That is the art. That which allows what is real to just have just that little detour through the aesthetic, allows the real to be consumed in a different way and gives you distance, or gives you a sense of reflection, or gives you a sense of appreciation, or takes something that is raw and turns it into something that is culture or cooked, you know?
Or
I'm thinking that is perhaps, would you mind if I read a paragraph from A Time Outside This Time? Because there I describe what are we doing with the news when we slow jam the news.
please.
So I'll just read. Yeah, thank you. So this is from the novel A Time Outside This Time. Why must one slow jam the news? Because all that is new will become normal with astonishing speed. You will go to visit your father and discover that he has pledged himself to the service of the great leader. Or you will visit your friend's house, and it will take a minute or more to realize that a meeting is underway. And now everyone is looking at you with suspicion. You notice one fine day that all the signs on the road have changed. Your town has a new name. Dogs have grown fat on flesh torn from corpses lining the street where you grew up. The beautiful tree outside your window is dead, has been dead for some time, and has, in fact, just now burst into flames. So there too, I'm trying to make my reader aware that what they are consuming as fresh news is actually is not fresh at all. In fact, all that has been fresh, all that was fresh every day and was shocking has now been tamed and has become normal. People have become numb to something. And that every new thing that is happening is even more shocking than before. But you don't see it as that. You don't see the history. All you see is newness. And somewhere the horror of it has been obscured. And then, therefore, the work of art should be to slow it down and show how it has happened. It's like one of those clips that you see on Instagram or on Facebook where someone will show you a little video of how something happened, and the speed has been altered, and therefore you see what has been happening in a different way, in a new way. That is perhaps what a novel can do.
Yeah, and I mean, at the velocity with which we are going through horror after horror, when it's slowed down and put inside a frame or put inside a novel, it's almost unbearable to face.
Yeah. And yet, you're right. Sometimes some things could burn you if, it's like looking up at the sun with your naked eyes. You need the goggles on that particular day. And perhaps art allows you to do that. What is unbearable, it allows you to look at it and to contemplate it and to take it in.
And that makes me wonder if, human beings we have been cautioned by our mythologies that great horrors have happened. Gods have been angry. That the gods themselves are dangerous.
Yes.
And yet we seem to continue down that path.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking in abstracts right now, so let me bring us right back to the news. Why what do you make of the fact that we are also taken with the Ambani wedding and not the pogroms?
Yes. Yes. I mean, what a horror. The horror. I mean, 50% of the poorest people in my country, in India, pay more than, I believe, 67% of the GST tax. This is, the goods and services tax. These people who have benefited most from all kinds of crony capitalism and government subsidies have not really had to pay for their wealth. In fact, they have only exponentially benefited from what people poorer than them put in the coffers, and that's how they prosper. Somehow that link is not seen, and certainly the media doesn't expose it either. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it was like a self-confessional moment, an orgy of confession of insider trading.
Yes, and shame on the politicians, even from the opposition, not all of them, but some of them, who could not turn away from, being in the Bharat.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Like they were the master of ceremonies.
Yes. Such vulgarity, really, and such ostentation. There must be also a lot of calculation in it, In the elections that just took place in India, there was a moment where Prime Minister Modi said about the Ambanis that they must be sending scooterful, he meant the auto rickshaws. They must be sending scooterfuls of money to the Congress. And it left many commentators confused because they had felt that these powerful moneyed people like the Adanis and Ambanis who had amassed their wealth with the support of the government, why were they being accused? And the wedding allowed for all such suspicions to be allayed and any tensions to be swept away because Modi was there to bless the newly married. I was also amazed, frankly, at the unending list of events that kept going on and on. What was behind that? I mean, we are talking about the velocity of news. Here was news that did not want to die. Somehow it was a claim to being it was how shall I put it? The newly rich wanting to tell you that they were not newly rich, they had been here forever, and that their wedding would last forever. They were eternal. They were immortal, actually. It was a desire to occupy history for the longest time.
I think you're you're onto something there. That they were connecting themselves directly to India's most richest tapestry of faith and mythology. I mean, they were connecting themselves to the gods.
Yes. Except one will also have to remember that their gods, or for example, their culture, you did not see Ustad Amjad Ali Khan. You did not hear the notes that even in a small town in India, you would hear at a Hindu wedding, Shehnai played by Ustad Bismillah Khan. Someone would play a recording. No. You had Justin Bieber and Kim Kardashian. So what you have really is not India history being engaged or understood, not the culture being engaged or understood in that way, but it's only one form of it, and that form kowtowing obsequiously to the Kardashians and the Justin Biebers of the world. Why is Rihanna there and not a Bharatanatyam dancer or a Kathak, which has its own funds of representations of romance?
Did you feel
such impoverishment amidst this wealth?
Bowing down, or were they सारी की सारी ये दुनिया मेरी जेब.
Yes, yes.
Right? I
सही
think
बात.
bowing down. The whole world was paying, well, not the whole world, but the celebrity politicians of this world were paying homage to the Ambanis. All hail.
Yes, I believe even the cards cost several lakhs rupees and everyone got gifts.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you know,
Mm-hmm.
millions worth going away gifts. The the 1 crore rupiah was, I believe, the price mentioned on the watches that were given to the performers like Shah Rukh and Salman. So who knows?
And now let's just connect that, bring it right here to the United States, where the likes of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are financing
Yes.
Trump and JD Vance.
Yes.
Like the Ambanis are bankrolling Modi, and
Yes.
that same sentiment,
Yeah.
same thing is happening here.
Yes.
Are you writing about that?
I'm certainly next week I'm going to take a long journey across India, and I was going to ask people in my interviews about the Ambani wedding. As to America, at one point, let's say 10 years ago, when India and China were being mentioned in the same breath, before India began falling out of the race quite drastically, quite dramatically, I had believed that if I went to China, I would understand India. But I certainly think that by trying to understand India, one can understand America better. Two reasons, or two ways in which I would like to explore further, and that's what I'm thinking about writing, is that what is happening with crony capitalism, uh, how capital dominates politics in more and more naked ways, is certainly going to become much more evident in this country. I also think that climate change, what is happening, so that would be about the environment of politics, the first point. But if we think about the politics of environment, in other words, all that is the effect of climate change, then the kinds of things that are happening there in India, the overheating, the floods, the rising waters, are being seen in glimpses in this country. And folks here really need to be much more alert to what is happening in India so that they know what is coming for them tomorrow. We heard at the Republican convention, Donald Trump declare that no other country has as vast a source of wealth as the United States. We are floating on liquid gold, he said. Well, if they continue to invest in fossil fuels, and if that is what they see as their future, then the enormous destruction that is happening in various parts of India, certainly in the Himalayan foothills, is going to be here everywhere. The sorts of things like the floods we have seen in Texas will happen much more frequently and much more with much more catastrophic effects. And so that is the sort of thing I want to write about over the next few months.
Well, when I think about India and just the size of its middle class now, which is what, 400 million people or 300?
Sure, at least, if not, yeah.
I mean, it's the size of the middle class alone in India is the size of the entire population of the United States.
That's right.
So in a way, if you look at it in terms of power, what's happening in India is far more powerful, I think, than in some ways than what's happening in the US.
Yes. Also, just the size of the youth in India and in the subcontinent.
Yeah.
Unemployed youth, unemployed and therefore easily exploitable by right-wing politicians, becoming, the stormtroopers of a fascist ideology. That is the real danger. So the middle class might have the power and influence and therefore power in the market. But if you think of those who are under the age of 25 and certainly under the age of 35, then that is half of the population. So that is about 60 million, 65 million. Think of a large, disaffected, violent population like that, and then you'll really understand what kind of disturbance can be caused globally. The pandemic taught us that borders will not prevent you from a cataclysmic reality. And that is only in the biological sense, but in a cultural sense, and in an economic sense, and in a demographic sense, we should be aware that living in a globalized world means that the US cannot, or people in the US, voters in the US cannot imagine that, they cannot inhabit a reality of exceptionalism. In fact, a globalized world means that their supply chains, their lives are intermeshed with people elsewhere. And if they do not take seriously challenges in places like India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, very important, especially with the rising waters, then they are living, they are ostriches with their heads buried in the proverbial sand.
But then there's also the other aspect. I thought that's where you were going, that because we live in a global, if we're talking about global economies and the movement of where we've always throughout time done that, but that here we have the Hindutva in India, but it's the financing began from our homeland here in the US.
Yes. And Europe, the whole ideology of fascism came from Hitler to, the man called Golwalkar, who was, one of the ideologues of the RSS. He drew his inspiration from Europe. And you're saying in more recent terms, the financing of the building of the temple on the site of the demolished Babri Mosque. Yes, people from places like the US were sending gold bricks to finance that. So yes.
And then that's true. I'd like to balance that out immediately, that that the same is happening in Pakistan, so that the financing of very fascistic ideas are going from the diaspora.
I see.
Back to the homeland, to the motherland.
Well, yes. Well, as I have been saying for some years, I always say the soft emotion of nostalgia has been turned into the hard emotion of fundamentalism in the diaspora. That is the experience of our peoples.
Yes.
You turn what would have been mere nostalgia into something so much more dangerous because you think you're contributing to the motherland that way.
How much of you is still very much rooted in India?
A lot of it, a lot of me. In fact, I believe that the reason I really am invested in journalism is because I think that is the way in which I re-enter the daily life of the country that I have left. It is a way of, I tell people that Haruki Murakami, when the subway attack happened in Tokyo, used the occasion to return. He was at MIT, I think. I believe he was teaching at that time. He returned from Massachusetts to Japan and conducted these long interviews about the sudden attack in the Tokyo subway as a way of reconnecting with his country. And I've always taken that as a great lesson in what writers should do. And I use journalism in order to return to my roots.
And how does your experience of Vassar and your teaching there fit into all of this, in terms of staying connected to your roots and staying connected with your art?
Yeah. Well, I teach writing and I teach literature. So the classroom becomes my lab to think through these things and to share them with my students, to practice it with my students, so that, the rule I give myself of writing 150 words each day and walking for 10 minutes each day is something that I ask my students to do. But I also, wanting not to fall behind in my practicing what I preach, I do the same. And therefore, I try to model for them what I want them to be. So that is how teaching contributes to my life.
Amitava, I've taken up an hour of your time.
I appreciate your taking the time. Thank you so much. But I'll now go and make some food for my wife.
Lovely, Amitava Kumar. Thank you so much for taking the time out to have this conversation with me today. And just before we go, what are you going to cook tonight?
I have already started. I bought small pieces of lamb, and I had, knowing that we were going to talk, I had put it on the stove, so it must be bubbling by now. I just need to add some tomato paste, and I've got some asparagus that I will grill in this air fryer that my mother-in-law had bought for us. And I will serve that to my dear wife, and hope she likes it.
Wonderful. Well, good luck with that. Bon appetit.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Shukriya.
Thanks for talking to me, Maniza. Thank you. फिर बात होगी. Okay, bye.
Khuda Hafiz.
खुदा हाफिज.